On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, a vote of confidence in Boris Johnson's leadership will be held this evening. The number of Tory MPs needed to trigger a vote, at least 54, have now written to Sir Graham Brady, the chairman of the Backbench 1922 committee. Sir Graham says some wanted to wait until after the Platinum Jubilee weekend.
Some colleagues had asked specifically that it should not be until the end of the Jubilee celebrations.
So did some of them post-date their letters so as not to interrupt the Jubilee?
I think that's not a bad description of what was taking place.
Downing Street says Boris Johnson welcomes the opportunities to make his case to MPs. LBC's political editor Theo Usherwood says it's difficult to predict how the secret ballot will go.
This is a moment for Boris Johnson, if he does have the support, to cement it and to be able to draw a line under Partygate. And I would expect that if he does win handsomely, things like the Privileges Committee, the by-election results, that sort of fades into the background. But of course, if it is narrow, then the expectation would be that he would go back to the country to re-secure his mandate, because otherwise it's very difficult to be a lame duck Prime Minister, knowing that half or nearly half your party don't want you to be leader.
That vote will take place between 6 and 8 p.m. this evening. Stay with LBC for the latest. Tube stations across London are closed because of a strike by the RMT union. Members are walking out in a dispute over jobs and pensions. London Underground is warning of severe disruption on the network until tomorrow morning. Arsenal Football Club have been accused of delaying life-saving fire safety work in residential tower blocks near the Emirates Stadium. It's 6 months since residents on Queensland Road got government funding to fix the buildings. Arsenal have denied claims that they wanted to wait until after the end of the football season for work to begin. What's thought to be the largest ever trial of a 4-day working week is getting underway in the UK. More than 3,000 workers at 70 companies are taking part in the pilot, lasting 6 months. Researchers will look at the impact on things like productivity. In the city a short time ago, the FTSE 100 was trading up 94 points at 76.26, and the pound buys $1.25 and €1.16. LBC weather: much of England and Wales will start cloudy with outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Elsewhere, dry with sunny spells, cloud and rain into the far southwest later, and a high of 20 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Simon Conway.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call Keir. Put your questions to the leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, now. 0345 6060 973. This is LBC.
Good morning, 3 minutes after 9 on Monday, June the 6th, and you will be putting your questions to Sir Keir Starmer in just a moment, but you must allow me the first question. Events that have broken within the last hour or so, actually under an hour, Sir Graham Brady confirming outside the Houses of Parliament, so the opportunity to have the Leader of Her Majesty's Opposition across me. I have to respectfully ask you to yield and allow me to ask the first question. Sir Keir, thank you for coming in.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, sir. What would your message be to Conservative MPs at around 6 o'clock tonight?
Oh, look, I think they've got to show some leadership and vote against the Prime Minister. He's lost the trust, I think, of the country. I think that's pretty clear on all the evidence that I've seen. But also, Justin Norman was interesting in the letter that he put out this morning. He's also got no plan for the country. And I think those two things mean that it's in the national interest that he goes. Now, obviously, there are some people in my party saying, no, Keir, it's very good that he stays because he's so damaged. It's actually helpful for the Labour Party. But looking at the national interest, I think Tory MPs have got to step up, show leadership and get rid of him.
He wouldn't be easier to fight at the next general election, Sir Keir?
Well, look, I think he's damaged. I think that, we can all talk about what MPs think and on our side of the House or their side of the House. We've just had local elections. I've been across the whole of the United Kingdom during those local elections. I think the mood has changed. I think the public have made their mind up about this man. They don't think he's really telling the truth about many, many things, not just Partygate, but just the general sense that this man doesn't really tell the truth, can't be trusted. But also, of course, we've got a cost of living crisis, and they're saying, where's the plan? Where's the government we need to lead? And the answer to that is we've got a government that's divided. We've got a Prime Minister trying to cling on to his job. I think most people would say your job is to help me through the cost of living crisis, and you're not doing it because you're distracted.
A scenario, the vote goes ahead, but he survives. What does history tell us then, Sir Keir?
I think history tells us that this is the beginning of the end. If you look at the previous examples of no confidence votes, even when Conservative Prime Ministers survive those, and he might survive it tonight, the damage is already done, and usually they fall reasonably swiftly afterwards.
The chances are then you won't be fighting him in the outcome, whenever the next general election is.
Look, that's up to Tory MPs, obviously, and I don't really mind who I fight, but I do think in the national interest that he should go.
I'm sure some of the listeners are going to reflect. Thank you for that. Let's get straight to the callers. That's what this must be about. Nora's on the Wirral, and you're through to Sir Keir. Go ahead, Nora. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Sir Keir.
Good morning, Nora.
Thank you for everything you do for our country.
Thank you, Nora.
Thank you for putting yourself first, and not putting yourself first, and putting the country first. That's really important. Anyway, my question would be, if you were at the steps of St Paul's last week, would you have booed the Prime Minister?
Now this is on Friday. At one of the services to celebrate, of course, the Platinum Jubilee. Very audible booing, I'm even going to say jeering of the Prime Minister, and rather unfortunately his wife as they arrived. Sir Keir.
Nora, I wouldn't, but I don't need to. I've got the opportunity to do that every day in the House of Commons. But Nora, it's such an interesting question, this, because we've all been in crowds, and crowds have a certain dynamic, and sometimes spontaneously they do things that maybe you don't expect. And this was a crowd of people who'd come to pay their respects and thank Her Majesty the Queen. And the boos, I think, reflected a mood across the country. And that's why, amongst other things, I think that's why many Tory MPs feel that basic trust has gone, Nora. But I think it is, having been across the country for the last few months, Nora, in the local elections, there is a sense, I think, of people thinking, actually, this guy doesn't have the authority to lead us. He hasn't got the plan that we need. Nora, would you have booed, incidentally?
Yes.
Why not? What is? I sense you've never been a fan of Mr. Johnson, but what specifically has turned you off or away from him, specifically over recent months, Nora?
Well, I have a niece who's an obstetrician, and she was delivering babies of people who they knew had COVID,
yeah.
And she couldn't get any PPE, and the people were ringing up to offer PPE to the government, and they were being put sidelined so that they could get their snouts in the trough, and that more people of their party could get more money. And but look at the outcome of that.
Nora, thank you for that. So, Keir, I have to put to you, you weren't booed, but you weren't cheered. It was a quiet reception. Is that what you'd expect?
Well, Nick, look, between arriving and walking in and being booed and not booed, then I know where I stand on that.
And, of course, if you've got Prince William and Prince George...
And you've got to remember, people were not there necessarily to deliver a verdict on politicians. They were there waving their flags in a fantastic show of sort of solidarity. I would just say one thing, if I may, because you touched on it, Nick. I don't think people should boo the Prime Minister's wife. And I've said this previously in relation to Carrie, and I'd say it about any political partner. They don't necessarily choose this path. And,
I think in some instances they actively choose against it.
For me, I'll attack the Prime Minister uphill and down dale because I do think he should go. But I've said before that I personally wouldn't get involved in criticising the Prime Minister's wife.
Let's just get a word from you on these 4 fantastic days of celebration. Sir Keir, what did you learn about the United Kingdom over the last 4 days?
Look, it was absolutely fantastic. And what I learned was that sort of community spirit of coming together, of a nation wanting to say thank you to Her Majesty for 70 years of dedicated service. And that was really fantastic. I think I'm right in saying that more people were involved in community events this weekend than has ever happened in the history of the country. And I saw people saying thank you, but also wanting through their community activity to replicate, if you like, or do a bit of something themselves which reflected what they think of the Queen, which is this public service. So it was the very best of Britain. It was a fantastic 4 days. In sharp contrast to what's happened this morning in relation to the Prime Minister. There's the two sides of Britain, but that was Britain coming together, celebrating. I thought all the events were absolutely extraordinary. And that moment when the Queen came back onto the balcony last night was quite a moment, I think, for the whole country.
Times we shall celebrate forever. I think you're right, Sir Keir. Next call, Sam in Enfield. Sam, you're on the radio. What's your question? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Good morning, Sir Keir.
Good morning, Sam.
Good morning. I recently found myself receiving a fixed penalty notice, in my case for a driving offence. But like yourself, Sir Keir, I'm also a person of integrity, honour and principle, and I don't believe I broke any laws, and I think I can prove it. So I've rejected my fixed penalty notice and intend to have my day in court instead. Now, my question to you, Sir Keir, is, would you consider rescinding your pledge to resign simply because you've received a fixed penalty notice? And if you're so adamant that you haven't broken any rules, to actually fight any fixed penalty notice in court and prove your innocence?
Well, Sam, thank you for that question. Obviously, this relates to an incident in Durham 13, 14 months ago now. I am absolutely clear that there was no breach of the rules in my case. We were on the road with a team. We stopped for something to eat. There was no breach of the rules, and I've made that clear over and over again. But Sam, I've also made clear that if I'm wrong about that, and the Durham police do issue me with a fixed penalty notice, then I will do the right thing and I will step down, because it's very important, I think, for everybody to hear and to know that not all politicians are the same. I think the Prime Minister's made a big mistake by trying to cling on in relation to the law breaking that we know went on in Downing Street. I'm different. And if that fixed penalty notice is issued, then I will do the right thing and I will step down from my post, because I do believe that our democracy relies on integrity and honesty, and I hold others to high standards, and I'm going to hold myself to those high standards. And I've made it clear that that applies if I'm issued with the fine, and therefore, Sam, I won't be doing what you quite rightly are doing under the law. That's your entitlement. I understand that.
Would you stand again, Sir Keir? Were you to step down? Would you stand again?
No. If I'm found to have broken the law, I don't believe I have. I'm absolutely clear there was no breach of the law. But if I'm wrong about that, I will stand down. That is a matter of principle for me. It's a decision I made very quickly after the decision was made to look at the case again. I obviously talked it through at great length with my wife, because this has huge implications for us. But I made my decision. I knew instinctively what I was going to do, and I'm going to stick with it.
One newspaper says there's concern or considerable attention paid to you being presented with a concept football shirt, and that indeed features within some of the questions you've been asked. What is the relevance of your receipt of this Concept AFC football shirt, Sir Keir?
I don't know. I've seen that. I'm not quite sure how that relates to this incident, other than I've always said that after I ate my curry in the kitchen, I then went back to the office to work, and we were back in that office, and that's where that photograph was taken.
But was that working, to be in receipt of a Concept football shirt? Is that a working event?
Well, I was back in the office actually going through the various documents for the next day, because this was a local election campaign. We were on the road with the team and up very early the next day at Durham to work. So then I was presented with a shirt and had a photograph taken. But I'm not sure what the relevance of that is, to be honest.
You mentioned the team. How many were in the team?
Oh, well, I was travelling with my usual team, and I can describe them rather than name them, because it's the same team I travel. This is the middle of a local election campaign. So I've got a camera person, I've got a videographer, I've got a policy advisor, a comms advisor, someone from the leader's office, and me. That makes 6. I've then got 2 protection officers, police officers travelling with me. That team of 8 goes pretty well everywhere I go. At the office itself, where we were having a curry, there was obviously Angela Rayner and someone from her team, because we were doing a joint event that night, and in fact a joint event the next morning in Durham with one of our councillors there, and Mary Foy and some of her staff.
So that explains the discrepancy, because if you recall, you told me this in January, How many people were there in total?
Well, I normally have about 6 with me. Whether it was 6 or not, I don't know. Usually when I'm travelling around the country, we have about 6 people.
And yet you told loose women a few months later.
Takeaway for 30 people delivered.
It wasn't
we
30
understand
people. That's already been retracted. We were just on the road.
How many was there?
About 15 or so.
So we have those two numbers.
Yeah, Nick, I'm very glad I can clear this up.
Good.
I was
Yes,
talking
absolutely.
on the first occasion about the team that travel with me, and that's usually 6, with the police officers 8.
Okay.
So that's where that number comes from. At the hall, there were, as I say, Andrew Rayner, I think one of her staff, and Mary Foy and a few of her staff.
OK, thank you for that. To the next one, thanks, Sam. Good luck. Good luck. I hope the legal process goes in the correct fashion for you. Ian is in Auchterarder, if I'm saying that correctly, in Scotland. Apologies if I've got that wrong, sir. Good morning.
That's not a problem. Don't call me sir. I work for a living.
Morning, Ian.
Good morning. And good morning to you both, and good morning, world.
Hello, sir.
Sorry.
Yes.
I've just stood up.
OK. You're all right to proceed with your question, sir? Is that all right?
I'm fine. Just that with the current cost of everything going up, price, cost of living, we were hit with a bombshell just a few months ago when my wife was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer.
Oh, Ian, I'm really sorry to hear that.
Okay. And I mean, we had all these dreams of getting the mortgage paid off. You know, this is what we're going to do in retirement and so forth. And she's only 53.
That's right.
And she's just had her first chemo. And she's doing okay, but she's not brilliant. Last night was a terrible night.
Oh, Ian, I'm sorry.
And I've been up most of the night with my wife, and I've also got to come out to work because seemingly we have to try and take in as many hours as we possibly can. I've got a better job.
Well, enormous
So I'm working
sympathies. Can I move you to your question? Enormous sympathies, both from me and, of course, from Sir Keir. What would your question be, sir?
What are you going to do about the cost of living?
Oh,
You're not in government. You are in government to a point, but you're actually not the Prime Minister. How can you persuade... I'd like to call him, but I won't. I'll try and be professional here.
Okay.
How can you persuade this current government that seem to be more intent and providing for... I mean, the House of Commons says in itself as a common people.
OK. Just remind, of course, Sir Keir is not in government at all, but he is, of course, leader of her Majesty's opposition. And for you and your wife, and again, best wishes to her, this is going to be so crucial, eking out those pounds and pence, Sir Keir.
Yeah, Ian, I'm sure I speak for every single person listening to this. You know, send our very best wishes to you and your wife in the very difficult circumstances that you're in.
Yes,
Thank you for raising the cost of living. Because, as Nick has just said, we're obviously in opposition rather than government, and therefore we can say what should happen, but we can't necessarily make it happen. What we were saying, in fact, last time I think I was on this show, Nick, I was saying there should be a windfall tax on oil and gas companies in the North Sea.
Did you mean a temporary targeted energy price cap levy, Sir Keir?
I meant a windfall tax.
Oh, right,
I think the Chancellor did as well, but he obviously didn't want to call it a windfall tax. But Ian, we were calling for that, and we said that tax on the profits that weren't expected should be used towards energy bills, taking up to £600 off the bills of those that need it most, Ian. Now, that actually forced the government into a U-turn, and that's very rare for an opposition to be able to do that. And I'm really pleased about that because, one, it means the argument we were making was the right argument, and two, it means the government has made that U-turn. I think, Ian, they need to go much further than that. I always said there should be an emergency budget, so a really good hard look at the cost of living, because, Ian, as I went around the country in the local elections, politicians obviously quite often say, oh, what's coming up on the doorstep all of the time. I can tell you this came up over and over and over again. People saying to me, Keir, I can't afford to pay my bills. And Ian, quite often it was people who had themselves disabilities or family members with disabilities where their energy costs were even higher than the average family. And there was a real impact there. So I wanted to see that emergency budget so this could be addressed properly and comprehensively, Ian, because I think many people this morning will be looking back at the weekend and thinking it was a fantastic Platinum Jubilee weekend, but pretty well straight away saying, but, you know, it's back to me, to this basic question, can I afford my bills? And many people feel that they can't. And they also feel the government isn't helping them. They're right about that.
A few days ago, it was predicted we'll be at £100 to fill an average family car full of petrol or indeed diesel. We're probably north of £100. What would a Labour administration do to combat that, Sir Keir?
Well, obviously we would have implemented the windfall tax, slightly different to the government, but having asked for it, I think that I'd have done it differently. But there are other things that now need to be done, and under an emergency budget, if we were in government, we would reverse the national insurance tax rise. I think putting more tax on people when the bills are going through the roof, when it may cost up to £100 to fill a car, is the wrong thing to do. I'd also like to...
How would that help with the cost of fuel, though? There's nothing directly with the cost of diesel
Well,
or
I think
unleaded.
what it would do would reduce the impact on the family purse. So that would make a big difference to people, including, in addition, I should say, reducing VAT on energy costs as well. But I'd also like wider measures, Ian, because in a sense we can't go short-term through this. We've got to be able to push forward with help for energy-heavy businesses who are really struggling at the moment. And I'd also like something to be done about business rates for small businesses. So we would...
When you say, I've got to ask you, when you say something to be done, presumably...
Reduction.
Cut.
Yeah. Well, actually, we've been very clear. We want to review business rates altogether and get rid of them in the long term. We'd take it in. I know, but we've been talking about this. Business has been talking about this for years. And many businesses who are on the high street would say, look, I'm paying business rates before I've sold anything. Yeah. And if you're online, you're not whacked in the same way. This isn't a level playing field. And I've listened to that argument. I've listened to politicians pushing it to one side. I'm afraid I've accepted that argument. And we've been going to be confident and bold enough to do something about it.
All right. I have to ask you, because other serving ministers and others have been asked how they are economising. Cabinet Minister George Eustace is buying own brand products to his local supermarket. Sir Keir, in what way are you economising?
Well, we economise by looking at what we buy every week when we go on the local shop, etc. But I'm not going to pretend that that I'm in the same boat as so many other people who are on much lower salaries than I am as a member of Parliament. So this isn't about me. Of course, we've got our family bills, we've got our energy bills.
Have you turned the thermostat down or anything like that? I know it's not on at the minute, but are the children having to have slightly colder shower water or whatever it might be?
Well, getting them in the shower's the struggle just at the moment. But look, this is hitting people really, really hard, and particularly those on lower incomes. I've been particularly struck by those with disabilities. I've raised one of these at Prime Minister's Questions, someone on a dialysis machine, and the costs have gone through the roof and nothing was done to help that man. Now, as having raised it in PMQs, in fairness to the government, I think some government officials have now been in touch with him, but the scheme needs to change.
OK, but there's nothing specific you're doing to combat the cost of living in the family?
Well, we're just careful like everybody else each week.
Thanks, Ian. Good luck again to you and the condition for your wife. I hope things go as well as they possibly can, and I know Sir Keir, of course, would echo that. Charlie's in Ealing. Charlie, your question. Go ahead. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, both.
Hi, Charlie.
Hi there, yeah.
Go ahead.
Hi, so I'm a tube driver on the Underground and an RMT member. I'm not on strike today, but thousands of my colleagues are. And we've got a Labour mayor who is overseeing what they're calling managed decline. And I have it on good authority lying about the RMT refusing to meet on this actual radio station. So I just wanted to ask Sir Keir what you would do as London Mayor to sort out this funding mess that we have on the tube.
As Prime Minister, of course, although he would have a Labour colleague as London Mayor. Charlie, stay on the line. Do you support the tube strike today?
Well, Charlie, the first thing I should say is in defence of the Mayor, I support Sadiq Khan, the Mayor. I don't think he's been lying about this or anything else. What he wants and what I want is to see an end to the strikes and to have this resolved. This has to be resolved by negotiation in the end. And of course, the Mayor isn't involved in those negotiations. That's both sides in the negotiations. I don't pretend to know all the details, but what I know of the issues that are in dispute, I think they're capable of being resolved, Charlie. I think they should be resolved. I think that's in everybody's interest. In terms of the managed decline, I would, Charlie, point out that it's the government that's starving TfL of the money that they need. So the decline is actually a direct result of the approach that the government is taking. But like everybody else, what I want to see is these negotiations are, resuming, everybody getting around the table. I do think these are capable of being resolved. I think they should be resolved because obviously, many people are affected by the strikes.
Just on this, as I understand it, there are 600 posts that Transport for London are not going to fill, so there's 600 jobs. They're not making anyone redundant. The union are concerned about that, and the unions also point to the issue of safety. That is why they have taken strike action. Do you support the strike?
Well, look, I don't want to see a strike. I want to see this resolved. I want to see this negotiated to a settlement. I think the failure or the inability to backfill those 600 jobs is all to do with the government funding, which is why we can't pretend the government is some impartial observer here. They're a central player in it, and they've got to step up and put the funding in place.
Let's just ask one final word response. Charlie, as you're so deeply involved in this personally, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, just like to say, I think Keir touched on it. There is a government that is going to have to resolve this, and that's why we're asking for the Mayor to speak to the union, because London Underground management seems to be incapable of doing anything about this dispute, and it's really disheartening for us members.
Yeah, I understand that, Charlie, and I think, the sooner this can be resolved, the better for everybody.
All right, thank you for that one. Just on the subject of strikes, you'll be aware that we could be facing a summer of strike action generally across the entire rail network. This is as one particular union wants a 10% pay rise. Mick Lynch, the General Secretary of one other union, the RMT, says this is a measure Sir Keir Starmer, he can decide whether he's on the side of the workers in this country or on the side of the bosses. He hasn't made it clear. Sir Keir.
I'm on the side of the public, and I want to see this resolved. I don't want to see strikes. Nobody wants to see strikes. I quite understand why unions representing their members want pay rises in the cost of living crisis. Of course I do. But I want to see this resolved by negotiation around the negotiating table. But I'm on the side of the public on this one.
You don't support strike action?
Look, I want to see it resolved. I don't think anybody wants to see strike action.
OK, thank you for that. Joe in Putney. Joe, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Hello, good morning, both.
Hello.
Hi, Joe.
Hello. I just wanted to know what your take on grammar schools were, because as far as I'm concerned, they're still very much an elitist rather than a levelling up measure. Unless you have an exceptionally bright child, and, most people are of average intelligence, they won't get into one of those schools unless you can afford a tutor of £50 upwards per hour. And ultimately, if your child gets the same mark as another one in the entrance exam, if you can move closer to the school. What would you really do about grammar schools to see them as not just a token measure, but a real measure for levelling up?
This, as it is suggested last week, there is some sense of movement within the Conservative Party to look at increasing the number of grammar schools. Currently, you can only increase what's called the campus. So if you have one in Kent, you can build one the other side of the town or whatever it might be. You can't start a whole fresh new grammar school. Sir Keir.
Joe, let me first confess, I went to a grammar school.
Good job you said that, Sir Keir, because I was going to ask you.
So I went to a grammar school, Joe. But having said that, and now having my own children, I've thought for some time that what we really need is just simply the best schools for everyone. And I don't think that testing people and separating them at 11 is the right thing to do. Our son is now 13, and when I look at the change in him in the last 2 years, it's been profound. And I think simply having a cut-off point at 11 where you segregate people into one school and another school is wrong. You should have a fantastic school for everyone with lots of different subjects in which they can excel. And I've thought that for a long time now, but I particularly think it now, having had children. Our daughter's 11, so I can see for myself that children develop in different ways at different ages. So, Joe, that's where I come in. I should also say that our son's just been packed off for a 5-day trip with the school this morning, so I'm still worrying about whether he's got everything in his rucksack.
He won't have. Having had two sons, I guarantee he won't have the socks or the whatever it is, the mince or whatever he needs. I mean, mince to he's not the mince for the spaghetti bolognese. There'll be something you've forgotten. That's part of being a parent. You're not pulling the drawbridge up, Sir Keir. I went, but no other child can.
No, but I think we can do better than that. And I think a really brilliant school for everyone where they can choose their subjects and have fantastic chances is what we need. I don't want to see any child going to school which isn't absolutely excellent.
Joe, thank you. Geraldine's in Waltham Forest. Your question to Sir Keir. Geraldine.
Yes, hi. Great to
Geraldine.
meet you both. Hello, hi. What I wanted to ask is, when are you going to address the dreadful Brexit deal that Johnson got? I'm not talking about us not having done Brexit, that's done, but no one is addressing the fact that his deal is abysmal. It's impacting the economy. It's hemorrhaging small businesses. It's a deal that's so bad that even Rees-Mogg has set up his business
All right. OK. Mr Rees-Mogg's not here to defend himself, so thank you very much for the input. Let's go to the broad aspect of the question, the, quotes, abysmal Brexit deal you need to address.
Yeah, Geraldine, look, thank you for raising this. And you're right to say that there's no question of going back. We've left, I think it's now, 6 years since we took that vote. So Brexit is done. What I want us to do, Geraldine, and the way I'd put it is this, that all this Prime Minister ever said was he would get Brexit done, and so he's got us out on the deal which you've described. What I want to do, and what we would do if we were in government, is make Brexit work, which is make sure that we've got a better deal that works, whether it's that for businesses, because so many businesses are struggling with the extra bureaucracy. They just want to trade well with their European partners and, of course, across the world, or whether it's
Can I
northern...
refer you to that? Sorry, talking about tens of thousands of Britons are stranded across Europe at the moment, Sir Keir, as you're possibly aware. They're unable to get back from their Jubilee weekend break because airlines don't have enough staff, airports don't have enough baggage handlers, and we have Steve Heapy, who's the chief executive of Jet2, saying this morning this is because of a reduction in the pool of labour due to Brexit. Sir Keir, do you agree with this, Mr Heapy?
Look, I think there are a number of factors behind the travel chaos, and it is chaos. But when it comes to Brexit, what I would say is whichever way you voted, you're entitled to a government that recognised the scale of the change and actually had a plan in place. We saw this last year with HGV drivers. As I say, whether you voted to stay or to leave is now irrelevant. But 6 years after that vote, I think everybody's entitled, Geraldine, everybody else, is entitled to a government that says, well, we've worked out what the changes are that we need to make, and we've got a plan for them. And what we've got with travel, as we've seen in the last few days and weeks, is yet again more chaos. This, I'm afraid, is the trademark of this government. Chaos and division instead of a plan for the country.
One Conservative MP said last week to Tobias Ellwood there could be a way back for the United Kingdom into the single market. Would that be something you would support?
I don't think that's a way forward. I don't think that's possible. And, of course, we've got to make Brexit work, but simply reopening that argument I don't think is going to take us very far forward.
Coming to the end of our time together, Sir Keir, while I appreciate you're not perhaps quite as wealthy as Rishi Sunak, he has decided that his £400 discount will be going to charity on energy bills. What will you do with your £400?
Oh, I'll do something proper and useful with it. We haven't discussed that as a family yet, but we'll put it to some good cause.
It'll go to a charity of some sort?
Yes. Usually I support domestic violence charity. Did a lot of work on domestic violence and sexual violence against women, and so usually that's where I tend to go.
OK. Can we resolve one thing? You will recall, a little while ago, we had a conversation about female and male anatomy. Annalise Dodds, your Women's and General Equality Secretary, says women cannot have a penis. Another of your senior colleagues, Stella Creasy, says a woman can have a penis. Sir Keir, can we put this to bed? Who's right?
Well, look, Nick, let me take this head on because you challenged me on this last time. And let me be clear, for the vast majority of women, this is all about biology. And of course they don't have a penis. We all know that. And of course they need safe spaces, and we'll support that. I've been supporting that for many years. And of course we want more equality for women. Again, the Labour Party's been fighting that cause for a very, very, very long time. So for the vast majority of women, biology is what matters, and it's very clear they don't have a penis. But let's not leave out of account that there is a small minority of individuals who are born in a gender they don't now identify with. Some go through a process, others don't. And that is very traumatic for them. And I, for one, I'm going to respect and support them. And I think that's actually when most people step back from this. They think, well, that's a fair assessment, Keir. 99.9% probably of women, it's all biology. We must support them. Safe spaces, more women's equality. But let's not pretend or disparage or fail to support a small group of people who actually struggle with their gender identity. And I think that we can resolve this if we all approach it in that spirit.
As an Arsenal fan, Sir Keir, on LBC this morning, you may not have heard this, my colleague Rachel Venables did a story about how the club is accused of delaying safety-critical cladding work in the residential tower blocks at the Emirates Stadium. A particular part of Queensland Road have been waiting 6 months. Let's put the scaffolding up and start safety-critical work. What's your reaction to this, and would you help these people who claim that Arsenal are not moving as quickly as they should?
Yeah, again, disclaimer, Arsenal's my club, and I don't really know the details. I was listening to the show, obviously, this morning, right. So I know a little bit, Nick, from what I've heard. If there's a blockage, it needs to be unblocked, in my view, because fire safety is absolutely paramount. I don't know what the blockage is, but Usually I get a job when I come on, Nick, that I've got to go away and look at. This is the job for this week, which is to get to the bottom of this and see whether, with our councillors or in some other way, we can't do something to try and push this on, because I don't want anybody worrying at night about whether the place that they're sleeping in is safe.
Final question, between 6 and 8 o'clock tonight, Sir Keir, which way is it going to go?
I don't know.
If you were a betting man.
I suspect he will cling on, but it will be clinging on. I think the damage is done. But in the time between now and 6 o'clock, I would say to Conservative MPs, do the right thing, show the leadership that's needed. I'd say to them also, you know that many Conservative voters are saying to you, because they're saying to me, these are decent Conservative voters who believe in our country, are saying, look, we can't support this man anymore.
And to use your language, Sir Keir, how healthy is it that we have a Prime Minister, quotes, who clings on?
Oh, it's really unhealthy. And it's a Prime Minister who puts his own career above all else. And that's why he's clinging on. And that's why it's in the national interest that he goes now.
Grateful for your time. Thank you for being here on Call Keir each month. Sir Keir Starmer, leader of the Labour Party. Now news on LBC at 9:35.
Sir Keir Starmer has told LBC Tory MPs should show leadership and vote against the Prime Minister in a confidence vote this evening.
There are some people in my party saying, no, Keir, it's very good that he stays because he's so damaged. It's actually helpful for the Labour Party. But looking at the national interest, I think Tory MPs have got to step up, show leadership and get rid of him.
Cabinet ministers are expressing their support for Mr Johnson, who will face a vote between 6 and 8 p.m. Downing Street says the Prime Minister welcomes the opportunity to make his case to MPs. Commuters have been struggling to get to work due to a strike on the London Underground. Around 4,000 members of the RMT union are expected to walk out for 24 hours in a dispute over jobs and pensions. Arsenal have been accused of delaying fire safety work in residential tower blocks next to the Emirates Stadium. LBC has seen an email in which the Premier League club said that the work can start after the football season. Arsenal have denied the timing is related to that. LBC weather, much of England and Wales will start cloudy with outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Elsewhere dry with sunny spells, cloud and rain into the far southwest later, and a high of 20 degrees.
Tonight with Andrew Marr from 6 p.m. only on LBC.
I take full responsibility for everything that took place on my watch.
He took full responsibility, by my count, around 12 times during his common statements. But what does taking responsibility mean these days? In the old days, taking personal responsibility was almost a synonym for I am about to resign. Well, I don't know what it means now.
Tonight with Andrew Marr from 6 p.m. Listen on your radio and on Global Player. LBC.